fast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting new ground in the digital age. From genomic codes to row-wide facts, we cut through the noise, no holding back. Not your daddy's dairy news tonight. We're sparking debates with every insight. The ring's not where the real fight's at. It's in the data, in the channel chat. From pasture to processor to your morning cup, we're raising the stakes. Try and get ahead of herd. Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd. Come on! The bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome back to the Bullvine Podcast, where we dig deep into the issues that impact your dairy operations' bottom line. Today, we're tackling an invisible enemy lurking in your parlors, water troughs, and even your cows: biofilms. Think your farm is clean? Think again. These slimy bacterial fortresses are costing you thousands in lost milk, stubborn mastitis cases, and antibiotic bills. And they're 1,000 times harder to kill than free-floating germs. In this episode, you'll discover why your spotless milking equipment might be a biofilm breeding ground, how phytogenics could revolutionize your approach to herd health, the shocking link between water trough slime and chronic infections. Stay tuned. This isn't just science. It's your profit on the line.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into a topic that might just change how you think about clean on your dairy.
Yeah.
We've been digging into a source called Fighting Hidden Biofilms on Your Dairy Farm. And, well, it paints a picture that's both a little unsettling and honestly kind of packed with potential value for your operation.
That's right. I mean, most of us feel like we've got the hygiene routine pretty locked down, right?
Sure. We wash, we sanitize.
We see shiny surfaces. But this source argues the real fight, the key enemy, is often invisible, microscopic.
Right. Thriving right where we might least expect it.
Exactly.
And this enemy isn't just like random bacteria floating around. It's something far more organized.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Johanna Fink-Gremmels, who's mentioned a lot on this material, she describes them as these structured bacterial communities. Okay. They're kind of cozy and protected inside this self-made, slimy matrix. Think of them like bacterial cities, maybe, with thick walls.
Bacterial cities. I like that.
Yeah.
And the source points out they are basically everywhere on a dairy farm.
Everywhere. Living in water troughs, clinging to milking equipment, coating the inside of water lines.
Wow.
And yeah, even inside the cows themselves, like in the rumen, other tissues.
Okay, so it's a sophisticated setup.
A really sophisticated defense system. And the mission for this deep dive, based on what we read, is to understand precisely why our standard cleaning, our treatments, often just fall short against these bacterial fortresses.
Right. And critically, what that failure is quietly doing to your bottom line.
Yeah, this goes way beyond just, looking clean. It's about finding and sealing a significant, often unrecognized profit leak.
Okay, so let's jump right into that, outlining the core problem. Biofilms as a profit drain. The source doesn't really pull punches on the cost, does it? Talks about thousands lost annually.
Yeah, on a single farm.
Yeah.
And it gets specific about how that money disappears. We're talking about those treatment-resistant mastitis cases that just keep popping up.
Ugh, the worst.
Stubbornly high somatic cell counts that hurt your milk price, and even like a subtle decrease in water consumption that you might not connect to anything specific.
Until you see the production drop.
Exactly, until you connect those dots.
It's a real contrast, isn't it? The source highlights how we've spent decades, perfecting ways to fight the easy stuff.
Yeah.
The free-floating planktonic bacteria.
The ones that are simple to kill when they're exposed.
Right, but it points out that in nature, bacteria mostly live in these structured biofilm communities. So fighting only the free floaters is like, well, the source uses a good analogy for Wisconsin farmers.
Oh, yeah.
Designing your whole barn ventilation only for a perfect summer day and just completely ignoring the brutal winter.
Huh. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You're prepped for the easy fight, but not the everyday reality.
Exactly.
Which brings us neatly to why they are such a hidden enemy, that visible cleanliness we see. It can actually give you this false sense of security. The source really emphasizes that biofilms aren't just, surface dirt. They're complex, organized communities living beneath the easily cleaned surface.
And Dr. Fink-Gremmel's point about them being everywhere really hammers it home.
It does. They're not just in the milking parlor water tanks, the cows' drinking facilities, the milking machines themselves.
And inside the cow, too.
And residing in the rumen and cow tissues, they've got footholds all over the operation.
And their defenses sound pretty incredible.
Oh, they're truly formidable. This piece highlights that bacteria living securely within a biofilm can be up to, get this, 1,000 times more resistant to antibiotics compared to when they're just floating freely.
1,000 times.
Yes.
Seriously, that number alone is just staggering.
It really is. And that statistic, well, it gets right to the heart of why those chronic recurring cases, mastitis that won't clear, metritis that persists, keep coming back.
Because you're not really getting to the root.
Exactly. You're treating the symptom, the flare-up, but you're not reaching the underlying protected bacterial community.
It sounds less like simple hygiene and, I don't know, more like dealing with microbial insurgency, like you're up against organized, fortified positions.
Precisely. Which leads us directly to a section this deep dive calls the clean water myth, focusing on biofilms in water systems.
Okay, because as dairy producers, we all take pride in providing clean water, right? Abundant, fresh.
Absolutely. But the source asks, is visibly clean, truly enough?
Yeah, because even if the water looks crystal clear, the source points out that if there's a biofilm layer, that slimy stuff on the inside surface of the trough or the pipe, it can subtly change the water's palatability. Just it doesn't taste as good to the cow.
And research from the University of Wisconsin cited here backs this up. Cattle are, well, surprisingly sensitive. They can detect even minor contamination, things we might not see or smell. And their reaction, they just drink less.
Like sorting TMR.
Yeah, exactly. Like they might sort through TMR if something isn't quite right with the mix. They just back off the water intake.
And we all know water intake is absolutely critical for production. Non-negotiable.
Totally. A cow needs roughly 4 to 5 pounds of water for every single pound of milk she produces.
So she's turned off by the taste, drinks even a little bit less.
Your production suffers. And you might be scratching your head wondering why the bulk tank reading is down.
Dr. Fink-Gremmels makes a really simple, practical suggestion here, doesn't she?
She does. It's quoted. Checking the water bucket for this slimy layer is one of the first and easiest measures a farmer can take to improve animal health and reduce the stress of infection.
Sounds basic, like really basic. But the source asks, how often is that specific check done consistently?
That's the key question, isn't it? Are we actually doing that easy, fundamental check regularly?
Or are we just focused on the visible stuff, clearing out algae or obvious dirt?
Right. While the invisible biofilm is already messing with intake by changing the water's taste.
Okay, so this flows right into another critical piece the material unpacks. Why antibiotics fail. And it makes a point to stress it's often not the drug's fault.
Yeah, and we've all been there. Those incredibly frustrating chronic mastitis cases.
Oh, absolutely. You treat, the signs clear up, you think you're good.
You think you've nailed it.
And then a week or two later, bam, that same quarter flares right back up.
Yeah.
It feels like you're just pouring money down the drain.
Exactly. And the source, drawing on Dr. Fink-Gremmels' insights, explains the core biological reason. It's not just that the slime physically blocks the drug, although that's part of it.
Okay.
Bacteria inside a biofilm fundamentally change their behavior. They actually alter their gene expression.
Change their genes.
Well, they change which genes are active. They essentially turn down or even switch off the production of proteins or components in their cell membranes.
The things antibiotics usually target.
The very things many common antibiotics are designed to target.
So the antibiotic shows up, ready to work, and the target just isn't there anymore. Like trying to shoot a bullseye that disappears the moment you take aim.
That's a perfect analogy. They go into this kind of defensive, low-activity mode,
Right.
And this mechanism is powerful. In human medicine, the estimate is 60 to 80% of all chronic infections are considered biofilm-mediated.
Wow. 60 to 80%.
And the source argues this translates directly to dairy. Those persistent mastitis cases we hate,
Yeah.
chronic metritis, recurring digital dermatitis lesions, biofilms are likely the underlying issue keeping these problems active.
Okay, and here's what the source calls the real kicker. And it sounds serious.
It is serious. When you use antibiotics against a biofilm infection and it fails to completely wipe it out because the bacteria are protected and altered,
Right.
you're inadvertently creating the perfect conditions for antimicrobial resistance to develop and spread.
Oh, great. So failed treatments make things worse.
In a way, yes. The source describes biofilms as multipliers for resistance. They become literal training grounds for superbugs.
Training grounds.
environments where bacteria can easily exchange resistance genes, strengthening their collective defenses against future attacks. And again, that statistic is worth repeating.
The 1,000 times one.
Bacteria and biofilms can be up to 1,000 times more resistant to antibiotics. It explains why you might get a temporary knockdown, but the resilient core survives, grows back stronger, and potentially carries new resistance traits.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to the dollars and cents. Because, as the source emphasizes, the ultimate measure of effectiveness on the farm is, profitability and sustainability.
Right, the bottom line.
Let's talk about the true economic cost of ignoring biofilms. This is clearly more than just the cost of a tube of mastitis treatment.
Oh, way more. It details specific costs that add up incredibly fast. First, there's the mastitis money pit. Cornell research puts a single clinical case at around $444.
That includes treatment, dumped milk, lost future production.
Everything. But that's the first case. What's the real cost when that same quarter needs treating again, maybe just weeks later, because the biofilm wasn't eliminated? And we can't forget subclinical mastitis, right? Quietly robbing you of 5-7% of production without obvious signs until the SEC report comes back.
Ouch. Then there's that hidden water consumption penalty we talked about.
Yeah, the source gives a really stark example. Just a 10% reduction in water intake, easily caused by biofilm making water taste bad, can knock 10% off milk production.
10% intake, 10% milk loss.
Pretty direct link.
Yeah.
So for a 100-cow herd averaging, say, 80 pounds a day at a 20-cent order milk price, that's potentially $160 lost every single day.
Wow. Do the math on that.
Over a year, that's over $58,000 just from cows not drinking enough because the water tastes a bit off. That's a massive, often completely unseen hit.
$58,000.
Okay.
That gets your attention.
Doesn't it? The source also brings up what it calls the equipment replacement paradox.
Okay, what's that?
Well, we have standard schedules for replacing rubber parts like inflations, right? Usually after 1,200 or maybe 2,500 miltings.
Yeah, industry standard.
But the article challenges whether those generic schedules are truly right for your farm-specific conditions. Are you potentially milking for weeks with components already colonized by biofilms before your schedule says change?
Or the flip side.
Or, conversely, are you replacing expensive parts prematurely, wasting money if you're maybe not actually facing significant biofilm challenges in your system yet?
It makes you question the standard advice. And it specifically calls out the standard azidol-cali CIP rotation too.
Right. Is it really effective at getting rid of mature Staph aureus biofilms on inflations? Or are we just kind of hoping it is, based on how well it kills the free-floating bugs?
That's a critical question for producers to ask themselves.
Absolutely. And finally, the reproduction ripple effect. Biofilms can set up shop in the uterine environment.
Ooh, didn't think of that.
Yeah, contributing to persistent metritis and endometritis. This stretches out days open, hurts conception rates.
More costs.
The source estimates every 21-day cycle a cow misses due to these kinds of reproductive issues costs around $42 in lost milk production value alone.
And that's before you add in extra insemination costs or the impact on your calving interval.
Exactly. All adds up.
So the source basically asks you, the listener, look at your records. Look hard at your operation. How many of these invisible costs, the repeat treatments, the weird production dips, the cows taking longer to breed back, could be quietly draining your farm?
Are you maybe just managing the symptoms of an underlying biofilm problem instead of actually addressing the root cause?
Which leads us to, honestly, a really exciting part of the source material, discussing a new approach. Talking to bacteria.
Yeah, or what they call the quorum sensing revolution. It's a shift in thinking. Instead of always just trying to kill bacteria, which we know often fails against biofilms,
Right.
what if we could just disrupt their ability to communicate and coordinate?
It sounds almost like sci-fi, but bacteria actually talk to each other.
They do, not with voices, obviously, but
Yeah.
they use the sophisticated chemical language. It's called quorum sensing. Dr. Fink-Gremmels defines it clearly as the language bacteria use to coordinate their metabolic and gene expression status to form a biofilm. It's how they sense how many of them are around.
And decide, okay, time to build the fortress.
Exactly. Time to hunter down, build that slime layer, and change their gene expression to defend themselves.
So the big paradigm shift here is, don't just focus on killing them. Focus on jamming their communication signals.
Make them think they're still just lonely, free-floating single cells, even when they're packed together in a crowd. Prevent them from coordinating that group defense.
And this is where the source introduces phytogenics, plant compounds.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Phytogenics are compounds derived from plants. And think about it. Plants have been battling bacterial biofilms in their own environment for millions of years.
So they've evolved defenses.
They've evolved their own natural defenses, including compounds that specifically interfere with this bacterial quorum sensing. They're natural biofilm battlers.
Dr. Fink-Grummels has a really compelling idea cited here, doesn't she, about how these might work?
She does. Her belief is that maybe 90% of the beneficial effects we see from certain phytochemicals in animal health might actually be through this microbial signaling interference.
Disrupting the quorum sensing.
Right. Rather than a direct antimicrobial effect, like killing the bacteria, or even a direct effect on the animal itself, it's working by confusing the bugs.
That's a huge shift from the traditional kill-it mindset.
It really is. And the potential uses for these phytogenic compounds mentioned in the source are pretty wide-ranging.
Like what?
Helping optimize rumen fermentation, which could even have knock-on effects for things like methane production, potentially.
Interesting.
Supporting cows during stressful periods like transition, when they're most vulnerable. And yes, potentially targeting specific pathogenic biofilms involved in issues like mastitis.
So this leads to the provocative question the source poses. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Given what we now understand about antibiotics often failing against biofilm-protected bacteria, how much longer will the dairy industry keep relying so heavily on that approach?
Especially when these alternative, non-lethal methods targeting bacterial communication show such promise.
Right. Are we kind of stuck in the old kill the bacteria paradigm when disrupt their coordination might actually be a much smarter, maybe more effective strategy?
It's a powerful question, and it naturally leads into the practical side. Okay, this is interesting, but what do you actually do about it?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Let's get practical. The source provides a helpful biofilm management checklist. Concrete steps, where to start tomorrow.
Okay, let's break it down. First up, a water system revolution.
Sounds dramatic. What does it involve?
Don't just wait for the troughs to look dirty. Establish a non-negotiable weekly cleaning schedule. Scrub them out for all water troughs.
Weekly scrubbing. Got it.
Maybe consider trying water treatment options that are specifically designed to prevent biofilm formation, not just kill free-floating bacteria. There are products out there.
And testing.
And go beyond just testing water for chemical contaminants. Periodically test for bacterial counts. High counts can be an early warning sign of biofilm presence, even if the water looks perfectly clear.
Okay, water system revolution. Check. What's next?
Second, a milking system biofilm audit. Think about integrating periodic use of cleaning products specifically formulated to penetrate and break down biofilms.
So not instead of standard CIP, but in addition to it.
Exactly, as an extra punch. And reevaluate your rubber component replacement strategy. Don't just blindly follow the generic milking count numbers.
Consider your farm's conditions.
Right. Your water quality, your cleaning system effectiveness, maybe you need to change more often, maybe less. And the source suggests exploring periodic use of peracid-based sanitizers.
Why those?
They've shown potentially stronger efficacy against biofilms in some studies compared to traditional options. Worth looking into.
Okay, good tip. Third point on the checklist.
Rethink chronic infections. Start viewing those frustrating recurring mastitis or metritis cases less as simple failures of the drug.
And more as potential biofilm problems.
Exactly. Talk to your vet about it. Are there diagnostic tests? Are there specific protocols for biofilm-associated infections?
And track the data.
Meticulously track recurring cases in your herd management software. Look for patterns. Is it the same cow, same quarter, time of year? Even related to who was milking, find the patterns.
Makes sense. Number 4.
Explore quorum sensing management. Have a real conversation with your nutritionist about maybe incorporating phytogenic compounds into your feed program.
Especially for vulnerable groups.
Particularly for transition cows. Yeah, they're under huge stress. Consider other plant-based support tools that might help the animal's natural defenses manage microbial challenges during stressful times.
And track the results.
Of course. Track everything carefully. Are you seeing changes in transition cow health? Fewer sick cows, better mastitis rates, improved feed efficiency? You need the data.
Okay. And the final point on the checklist.
Invest in better detection. This might mean bringing in a professional service sometimes. Let them sample critical areas inside water lines, on milking equipment surfaces, and test specifically for biofilm presence.
Go beyond just visual inspection.
Way beyond. Keep an eye out for new biofilm detection technologies as they come onto the market. And importantly, train your employees.
Train them what to look for.
Train them to recognize those subtle early signs, that barely perceptible slime layer in a trough, that faint slick inside a pipe, things that could signal a developing biofilm problem before it gets out of hand.
Okay, that's a solid checklist. It seems actionable.
Yeah, it brings it down to earth. So to kind of bring it all together, the bottom line is really about rethinking invisible enemies.
Right.
The source argues the dairy industry, while generally excellent at visible cleanliness, is still largely fighting yesterday's microbial battles, focusing on the free floaters.
While these invisible bacterial communities, the biofilms, have set up these fortified positions.
Exactly. And they're having a significant, often really underestimated economic impact. An impact producers might be blaming on genetics or nutrition or maybe management when biofilms are the hidden culprit.
It's really about acknowledging that many of our standard practices, sanitation, water management, mastitis control, equipment maintenance, they were mostly developed based on understanding free-floating bacteria.
They're not necessarily wrong, but they are fundamentally incomplete when you're faced with the reality of how bacteria actually live, which is often in biofilms.
But the source does sound optimistic.
It does. It highlights that progressive dairy operations, the ones starting to incorporate biofilm-specific strategies, they are seeing real results.
Like what kind of results?
Reduced treatment costs, definitely. Improved water intake, which translates to better production, lower somatic cell counts, and ultimately enhanced profitability. It pays off.
So the challenge this source puts directly to you, the listener, is pretty clear. Tomorrow, take a fresh look at your operation, but do it specifically through the biofilm lens. Walk your facility differently. Actively look for those potential hidden hotspots you might have previously overlooked.
Don't just glance at the water trough.
No. Run your hand inside. Feel for that subtle slime layer. Pull up your treatment records again, but this time, review them not just for individual cases, but specifically look for patterns of recurring infections, the ones that might just scream, biofilm.
It really boils down to that core question, doesn't it? Are you still primarily focused on fighting the easy-to-kill free-floating bacteria?
While the resilient organized biofilms are the real entrenched enemy, quietly draining your resources.
Or are you ready to adopt a more sophisticated approach, one that acknowledges and actually targets these hidden communities?
The choice is yours, obviously.
Yeah.
But as the source emphasizes, so are the consequences, hitting you right in the farm's financial health.
So just to quickly recap the absolute key takeaways from digging into this material. First, your water systems. They're potential ground zero for biofilms. They can cut intake and spread pathogens. Huge impact.
Okay, water systems first.
Second, antibiotics often fail, not because they're bad drugs, but because biofilms trigger bacteria to change their gene expression, making them resistant targets.
They dodged the bullet.
Basically. Third, the exciting opportunity lies in targeting quorum sensing. Disrupting how bacteria talk to each other, maybe with phytogenics, looks like a really promising alternative to just trying to kill them.
Jam the signal.
Jam the signals. Fourth, the economic impact is real and it's substantial. Chronic infections, reduced water intake due to biofilms, it can easily cost tens of thousands annually for a typical herd, like that 58K example.
The number sticks with you.
It should. And finally, the time to act is now. Start with simple steps. Scrub those troughs weekly. Audit your milking equipment's biofilm vulnerability. And fundamentally rethink what clean really means, especially beneath the visible surface.
Definitely a lot to chew on there. And maybe more importantly, a lot to actually go out and look for around the farm starting, well, today.
If there's one takeaway from today's episode, it's this. Biofilms aren't science fiction. They're stealing your milk check right now. But you don't have to lose this war. Start by scrubbing those water troughs weekly. Audit your CIP protocols and ask your nutritionist about quorum sensing disruptors. Your cows and your wallet will thank you. Got questions? Heard health mysteries? Reach out on social @TheBullVine or visit thebullvine.com. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo and keep milking smarter.